Tokyo, the US President Donald Trump in a meeting with Japan's new Prime Minister, very new, only elected by the Parliament this month, that's Sanae Takachi. Let's listen to Donald Trump.
Capacity very substantially, and we've received your orders for a very large amount of new military equipment, and you know that we make the best military equipment in the world, the jets, the missiles, and everything else, and hopefully we don't have to use them very much, if at all.
All right, let's go out live right now to Tokyo, moments away from seeing President Trump and the Prime Minister of Japan, and they will be having their meeting and also doing remarks. Here we go, the president coming through. Let's listen in.
The moment the cameras turned on in Tokyo, something subtle but seismic happened. A new leader of Japan stood at the podium, speaking with a mixture of gratitude, ambition, and a clear message. The alliance with the United States is not only alive, it's ready to be rebuilt, deepened, and modernized. The American president, sitting just feet away, listened and smiled. But beneath that smile, the global chessboard shifted. He heard praise that bolstered his image, and he saw a partner promising deeper defense, massive equipment purchases, and cultural gestures meant to reaffirm a once unshakable bond. At the same time, far from the bright lights of the state visit, another quiet diplomatic story was unfolding. Canada, once content to play a supporting role, was actively carving out influence across Asia through trade, diplomacy, and strategic modernization. This is the story of a moment when applause in Tokyo met subtle repositioning across the Pacific, and the result was a new balance of power that will demand attention from Washington, Ottawa, Beijing, and capitals across Asia. The opening line from the Japanese Prime Minister was personal, warm, almost intimate, a note of friendship, and a clear nod to shared history. She thanked the president for his friendship with predecessors, praised his diplomacy, and reminded the world that Japan and the United States together formed the greatest alliance. She spoke of protecting national interests and restoring a dynamic diplomacy. She announced symbolic gestures, a gift of 250 cherry trees to Washington, D.C., fireworks from a northern prefecture for July 4th, and then, almost casually, mentioned very practical items: large orders for jets, missiles, defense equipment. Those off-the-cuff details were not just procurement lines on a balance sheet. They were the scaffolding of a strategic relationship, one where shared capabilities, industrial ties, and interoperability matter as much as ceremonial gestures. The president's response was predictably effusive. Praise for Japan, appreciation for the orders, reminders of shared values. He spoke of trade, of how the two economies will do tremendous trade together, and offered full-throated support for Japan's defense modernization. That public exchange, smiles, gifts, promises made for good headlines. But beyond the staged cordiality, the real news was more complex. First, the signal to Beijing. Japan was announcing increased military capacity and procurement from the U.S. market. That sends an unmistakable regional message. Tokyo intends to deter, to prepare, and to partner closely with Washington in the Indo-Pacific's uncertain future. Second, the signal to allies and partners. A Japan strengthened by American hardware and diplomatic backing is a Japan likely to play a more proactive role in regional security initiatives, maritime security patrols, and coalition building around freedom of navigation. Third, the signal to domestic audiences in both countries. For Japan, it reinforced national resilience and pride. For the U.S., it bolstered the president's image as a deal-maker who can secure major security purchases, a politically useful narrative back home. But while the optics in Tokyo read as a reinforcement of the old axis, Washington and Tokyo standing shoulder to shoulder, the broader strategic tide is more nuanced. The Indo-Pacific of today is not the simple bipolar theater of the Cold War. It is crowded. China's rise, and increasingly assertive Russia, the rise of regional powers like India, and the recalibration of once stable partners have created a fluid environment. Within this fluidity, Canada's role becomes surprisingly consequential. Ottawa has spent the last few years quietly accelerating its outreach into Asia, not as a replacement for Washington, but as an insurance policy against overdependence. Trade missions, deepening ties with ASEAN, new investments in green tech and critical minerals, and a willingness to speak with both Washington and Beijing have made Canada a nimble actor in a region hungry for partners. Think about it. Japan wants security equipment and predictable partnerships. The US supplies some of that hardware and credibility. Canada supplies something else: access to resources, a reputation for rule-based cooperation, and an aesthetic of calm diplomacy that works with many Asian capitals. Ottawa's exports of minerals for batteries and semiconductors are increasingly strategic, and its diplomatic posture careful, pragmatic, and multilateral appeals to nations that do not wish to choose sides in a stark binary. As Japan and the US talk about jets and missiles, Canada talks about supply chains, green hydrogen, rare earths, and AI collaboration, and those levers matter in the long game. Closer to the podium in Tokyo, the cherry tree gift captured imaginations. It is a beautiful act of diplomacy loaded with symbolism. Cherry trees are about renewal, resilience, and the cyclical nature of democratic relationships. Promising fireworks for July 4th is theatrically patriotic, but it is also a promise about continuity. An assertion that despite global shocks, annual rituals and traditions endure. Diplomacy at its best works on both levels: gestures that bind hearts and practical measures that secure futures. Both were on display that day. But what really changed the calculus was the defense procurement. When a country commits to major equipment purchases from a strategic ally, it isn't just a transaction. It builds industrial interdependence, supply chains, joint training, co-production possibilities, and long-term lifecycle support that locks in partnerships for decades. For the United States, selling jets and missiles to Japan is smart geopolitics. For Japan, buying US equipment is a way to ensure interoperability and credible deterrence. For critics, these deals can feel transactional, but they do something crucial. They create shared stakes. The same aircraft that Japan flies may be used in combined operations. The same missiles could be interoperable in a coalition response. Those are not hypothetical outcomes, they are the architecture of regional stability. Now imagine all of that playing out while Ottawa deepens its presence in Southeast Asia. Canada's pivot to ASEAN is not theatrical, it is strategic. The region is home to some of the fastest growing economies in the world and is a center of supply chain dynamism. Canadian companies are investing in green infrastructure, digital finance, and critical minerals projects across Southeast Asia. These investments help countries wean off single supplier dependencies and create alternatives to Chinese-led projects. Canada's approach is attractive precisely because it is perceived as less politically intrusive. Trade, investment, and capacity building, without the heavy geopolitical strings attached. So we have a layered reality. Tokyo and Washington reinforcing defense and deterrence. Ottawa quietly building economic bridges across Asia. Each actor is moving to secure its own interests, and each move affects the others. From Beijing's perspective, a Japan with enhanced US hardware is a worry. A Canada increasing its economic footprint in Asia is a challenge to the narrative of inevitable influence. From Seoul to Jakarta to Canberra, capitals watch these interactions and adapt accordingly. This is how balances shift in the 21st century, not always through dramatic confrontations, but through 1,000 steady adjustments. Let's pause and look at the domestic politics that animate these foreign policy choices. In the United States, defense sales and high-profile alliances are politically potent. They create jobs, strengthen congressional constituencies, and appear as proof that the president can deliver. The president's message in Tokyo praising Japan's purchases, celebrating shared values, promising continued cooperation plays well with that domestic audience. But the same gestures that score points at home can raise tensions abroad. In East Asia, large defense deals heighten concerns about an arms buildup and could provoke countermeasures. Effective diplomacy, therefore, requires nuance, assuring partners without escalating regional anxieties. In Japan, the new Prime Minister's explicit commitment to boosting national power diplomacy, defense, economic capacity, technology, intelligence, and human resources suggests a more proactive Tokyo. That has consequences. Japan's increased defense spending and procurement will require public buy-in, parliamentary support, and industrial alignment. It will also incentivize Japan to take on greater regional responsibilities, whether through joint maritime patrols, cybersecurity initiatives, or economic partnerships supporting infrastructure development across the Indo-Pacific. And when Japan leans in, other democracies may feel freer to step up too. Canada's domestic calculus is different, but equally consequential. Diversifying trade is about resilience and jobs. When Ottawa signals it will partner with ASEAN countries and invest in green energy, the message is twofold. First, Canada is protecting its economy from shocks created by over-reliance on a single market. Second, it's asserting an independent identity in global affairs. That independence is politically attractive at home because it promises economic opportunity while maintaining principled foreign policy positions around human rights, democratic norms, and rule-based systems. Now let's consider the reaction from Beijing. How would China interpret the Tokyo visit? And Canada's Asia Outreach China watches closely. It tracks procurement decisions, diplomatic visits, and ceremonial gifts because each contains strategic hints about the cohesion of the US-led networks. A Japan doubling down on defense purchases from the US tells Beijing that Tokyo is preparing for prolonged strategic rivalry. A Canada expanding trade and offering itself as a reliable partner to ASEAN countries tells Beijing that Washington's influence can be supplemented, even countered, by middle powers. Beijing's response may include a mixture of diplomatic outreach, economic carrots like infrastructure finance, and tailored pressure in areas where it has leverage. It's a chess match where every shipment of equipment and every memorandum of understanding shifts the board. And as the cameras shut down and the leaders walked away from the podium, one thing became clear: the world had just witnessed more than a diplomatic exchange. It was a quiet reshaping of global power. Trump may have heard words of praise, but behind those smiles, Japan and Canada were already redrawing the lines of influence across the Pacific. The balance is shifting not with noise or threats, but with calm precision. And by the time Washington realizes what just happened, the game board might already look very different.